Hey, welcome everyone. This is the ComicBase live stream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. And for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking life hacks for comic book collectors. Not so much comic-based things for once this week, but comic-based will come into play, no doubt. But we're mostly going to try to talk about like how to make the things we got to do as comic collectors just a little bit easier. And before we get into that, I did want to say, first of all, if this is the sort of thing that you like, please hit the like and subscribe buttons and hit that bell for notifications on YouTube if you're on there. And please also, tell your friends. It helps also if you guys write, if you could write like a one-line comment in the YouTube comments. We're trying out something here with the algorithm stuff, but just something like, this is the worst show on the internet, or Pete, your hair looks lovely today, whatever it is. But if you'd put that in there, there's a theory going around and I want to test it. So if I could impose on you for that much, it would be very lovely. Anyway, before we get too deep into things, I want to say hi to the folks who are here. Richard Scott, who is here but not here. It's like a koan. I'm not sure about that one. Mike Beam, welcome from Vancouver. Oro from Minneapolis, where it's a little chilly, 31. I'm going to say out here, it was 25 degrees when I woke up yesterday. We were going to do a bunch of gardening stuff, and then I called up my mom, who's like my garden advisor, because she understands plants and I don't. I was like, you don't want to freeze your butt off today, do you? And she's like, no, not at all. It's 73 degrees out here. I don't understand the weather out here in Tennessee at all. Anyway, Greg Hecton is in the house, having been, had gale force winds knock him out of a planned trip he was going to do. Jet City Comics is here from Orting, Washington. So someone cut the internet cable down the road for the copper wire. Oh, great. So using his phone as a hotspot, and it's super slow. I'm amazed it works at all, man. Anyway, glad we're welcome. You can join us. Jeff Welke from the Pacific Northwest is here. And let's see what else we got going on here. Sound is good. So no echo. We're going to take it. Or says, my bad too. But yeah, I've done that trick myself, man. Anyway. So before we get into the life hackery, and we were going to be talking lots of life hacks, I'm going to also try to slow down from my normal breakneck Ben Shapiro-esque cadence. Matter of fact, I'm like the fast version of Ben Shapiro. Anyway, a couple of just brief announcements. First of all, the big announcement, which I forgot to mention yesterday, because we got so into the show, is as of last week's update that we're pushing, like right as the show was on, ComicBase has now hit 1.25 million comics in the database. Now, 3 million newspapers and hundreds of thousands of books and magazines as well. But, it's called ComicBase, for goodness sake. And 1.25 million comics in there. I think we hit the 1 million mark about 2.5 years ago. Staggering amounts of information. A lot of it is foreign stuff that's come in. A lot also is the fact that every darn time they print an issue, it comes out in 37 variations these days. So the velocity of comics that's coming out there is absolutely nuts. Someone had me look it up yesterday, and how many comics were published month to month, and just new comics, it's like 1,400 every month in the United States, just on an average month for the last 3 months. And then we're also going back in indexing and fleshing out in data on, pretty much everything that's been, had a word caption near it, or a word balloon near it, since I believe 1878 is the earliest comic that's in ComicBase. So it's been a big, long journey. We started this one 31 years ago, but 1.25 million comics as of today, and I guess they're pushing the week's update just about as we speak. So it'll be more by the time we're done with this show, probably. But anyway, in order to kind of commemorate this stupidly large number of books we had in here, we are having a sale. We don't do these that often, but this is as good an excuse as we're ever going to have. So if you have not updated your ComicBase in a while, or if you're thinking of getting into having a really powerful program manage your comic book collection, now is a really great time. So head on over to comicbase.com. You can save about a third of the prices on new things, old things. We have a deal on the one barcode scanner we still have in stock. We're waiting on resupply for the wireless ones. But yeah, come over, save some money. That'll be going for about a week. But we had some trouble getting the mails out originally. We just switched mail servers, so we changed up the dates originally. If you got a note saying that the sale was going to be over by now, that is why. But go check that out, and if we can help you out with anything, please let us know, and we're happy to get you in the game. So with all that said, one last want to do one last check here. Okay, yes, one last bit of news. If you are using Atomic Avenue or ComicBase to get SMS notifications when you get things shipped to you, or when people make changes, things. Be a little careful for the next couple weeks, because there's been a big change in there's the regulatory apparatus around. They call them 10 DLC numbers, 10-digit long codes. Basically, the ability for just any normal person to send messages to people who sign up to get text message alerts. And apparently, our service provider and that sort of thing is having a hard time processing paperwork in a way that makes this all normal. So if these things, I don't know for sure. I got one this morning, but I think there's a decent chance that SMS messages may be unreliable for the next couple, 3 weeks. So pay attention to your emails. You should be getting notifications on those things anyway. But if you don't see text messages for the next couple, 3 weeks, we're working on it. But yeah, another fabulous gift from Washington to the ease of use of your life. But the good news is, I'm sure it will all stop all spam and other troubles on the internet, just like the canned spam. Ever since that thing was passed back in the 90s, I haven't had a single spam message. I don't know about you. So I'm sure that Congress is on it, and we will never have another spam text SMS message after this. So anyway, so yeah, hey, good news. So all right. So let's get on to it. Life hacks. And I was talking to our producer, or wrench who's in the house here, Mr. Gregory Hecht, right before the show. He says, "Yeah, the first life hack I've got is don't use tape." And I'm like, that's actually the first one on the list, anyways. Not exactly in those words, but we're getting there. So the first question is, you bagged and boarded your comic books, and you put them in, you put them into to file and everything. But as you open up a box, you look at it. All too often, we're looking at pop tape. There's like this one. You filed something in, and it's caused the tape to pop up on the book that was right next to it and everything. And so now there's all these flaps hanging out everywhere, and it looks just a mess, and it makes it hard to kind of flip through the comic books and see things. It just looks yucky. So what's the solution to popped bag tops? Well, some people think, well, clearly I need to do a much better job of taping. If I use like 3 pieces of tape instead of 1 piece of tape, then that'll sort it out. And I used to think this too myself, but that was many, many years ago. And I've come to certain conclusions about comic books in the meantime. One thing that you have to realize about comic books is that every time you look at one of these suckers, and this is just the week's books that came in, is I was just finishing up the bag boarding and filing is right before showtime. Every one of these darn things think of it as a $5 bill. If you knew nothing else about a comic book, just think $5. Regardless of age, obviously the older they are, the more valuable they are. But if you know nothing else about a comic book, think probably about $5. The other thing you got to know is, every time you damage this thing in the tiniest way, every time you bend a corner back, every time you get a big smudge on it, you put a nick in the spine, you do anything else like that, it's the easiest thing in the world to knock it down from near mint to very fine, and you've just shaved a third of the value off that thing in the 1 second it took to do that. So you have to be very, very careful with your books. Otherwise, that $5 becomes $3.50 very, very quickly, and it goes down from there. So one thing you want to do as you're trying to bag and board your books and keep everything nice is you want to avoid all the things that destroy the books. So, well, of course, we start out, we bag and board them, which is to say, we put a thin piece of cardboard in there along with a plastic bag. And when I put the comic into the bag and board, I've got a long way towards making sure that it stays near mint. I'm not going to be smudging it up with my fingers. I'm not going to be, I could, if I want to, really flex the spine on it, but it's not as likely. Whereas if I didn't have that board in there, just the act of filing it stands a pretty good chance of crumpling it a little bit and leaving some spine marks. So this is all the stuff we do. But what about the dang popped the popped tabs as we go along there? Well, the thing you don't want to do is use tape. Now, some people, they don't even tape their books at all. They delicately fold, the top flap in there, smooth it out. It takes all day. And honestly, this is not my preferred style of working at all. I actually like a nice tight seal and so forth like that. But the one thing you will absolutely love is stop buying regular comic bags, spend the extra penny and buy resealable comic bags, which is to say comic bags that have a little strip over here. You flip this off, and then there's basically a little glue adhesive strip on the back there, and the bag stays sealed along its entire length. This thing is not coming open. But as I was sitting there thinking about the life hackery of this whole thing and how I hadn't destroyed a comic book with tape in a dozen years, because it used to be anytime you opened up an old comic book, it had these little strips of tape dangling there, which acted like magnets to grab onto the cover, especially the most valuable comic book you own. That copy of Hulk 181 or Avengers #2 or whatever it is. Those tape strips, you might think that they are sitting there just minding their own business, but no, they are pulled like magnets toward the delicate face of that comic book, where they will adhere with a incredible ferocity that they never exhibited when they were just trying to keep the bag shut. But no, they'll adhere to that comic cover, where no matter how delicately you then try to peel the tape away from that comic cover, you're going to take part of the cover with it. And then you've then just reduced your copy of any of those books from very fine to about good, in one go, depending on how badly that tape stuck on there. So no, the answer is don't use tape. If you have a tape dispenser, throw it away. Get it out of your comic book room. Don't let it near your books. Invest in resealables, because resealables, I was also thinking, well, okay, I've been better. I haven't had the bag popping, but I mean, why have I not had a single comic that I've damaged on the cover like that in a dozen years? And the answer isn't just entirely that I've been really good about bending the bag back and keeping the tape away from it when I inspect comic books and do things like that. No, it's actually built into the device itself. Two amazing safety features. One, I go and pull this up, is the part of the flap that gets anywhere near the comic book has no adhesive on it. The adhesive is purely on the backside. It is impossible, as I pull this comic book out of there, to touch it to the adhesive on the back here. But that's just safety feature number one. What if I am the clumsiest person on the planet and I lay this thing on top of a comic book that's already got it here? And now I'm going to do this on camera. You can feel free to gasp in horror as I risk the condition of my Van Helsing Vampire Hunter #2. I'm going to take this openly exposed adhesive here. I'm going to slam it right on top of Van Helsing Vampire Hunter. And you can see I'm holding it by the board here. It's not moving. It's stuck. Or is it? I go like that, and this is where the miracle of resealable comes to your rescue. Is unless this comic book is moldering in the dust and it's about 1,000 years old, in which case you shouldn't be using regular bags anyways. You should be using Mylars. But for a regular normal comic book, you could stick this thing to it all day long and just pull it right off, and it will leave no residue on the book. It will damage it no way whatsoever. So yeah, guys, I can't tell you, resealable bags all day long. Where do I get them from, you say? A company called BCW is the supplier we use. I'd say go get them resealable bags from there. Get as many as you think you're ever going to need. If you buy large enough orders, they give you free shipping. It turns out with a lot of these supplies, the shipping is really where you really take it in the neck, is because everything tends to be heavy, especially if you're ordering the boards as well. But head over to BCW or a similar place, buy as many as you think you're going to need, and go resealable all day long. One thing that I will say is a bit of a trade-off here. You do get, again, these things, they do their job very, very well. They don't pop up on you, and they don't damage your comic books, and that is 99% what I want to have a comic book. The little flippin' plastic strip that you take off when you're sealing it for the first time, those dang things are a pain in the butt, because you will throw them into a garbage can and you'll realize that they're so light that if there's any static buildup in your life whatsoever, they will literally levitate out of the garbage can and go laying around your floor or something like that. So they're really weird. Again, you get a real appreciation for what static charge can do to an incredibly light piece of plastic, which is what those things are. One thing that I found, if you are ever dealing with that particular menace in your life, don't have any other plastic in your garbage can. Certainly don't have like other, comic bags and stuff like that on top. If you do, grab the first piece of paper you see, shove it into the garbage can. At that point, they become much easier to ditch in your garbage because paper isn't as affected by static as plastic is. And then the other thing about them is I literally find myself either wadding them up in my hand, crumpling them, and then throwing them with some veracity, veracity into the center of the garbage can, or whatever else. But or just keep your garbage can, mostly empty. But that is the one bad thing I'll say about the resealable bags. All right, so let me check what we're doing here. Some comments want to go here. Sounds about that. Okay. All right. Oro says, I put the top of the comic in the bottom of the bag. You can do that. That does work. As far as if you don't feel like sealing, it's just, like I say, for me, just this is probably just my anal retention coming through. Is I like a nice tightly sealed up package that opens the way I expect, and I'm not getting fooled. But I mean, if you're used to opening it from the bottom, then that works just fine. Greg says, if you buy comic bags that have an adhesive seal, buy all those wholly. Don't buy the ones with the adhesive on the flap. Oh yeah, and there used to be some company that did that, and that's stupid. I mean, you're at that point you're doing a full body version of what tape does. No, all the sensible guys. I mean, go with the BCW ones, are the ones that we use all day long. Have the adhesive on the back. Definitely the way to go. But the fact, I had to really think about this. Like, I hadn't really put together in my head until I was thinking about ideas for the show, is the fact that it's actually a very low grade adhesive, a very low power. Basically about the only thing it's qualified to stick together for any length of time is plastic on plastic. It is actually the thing that saves your butt on this one. It's a lot like a sticky note. If you guys know about the origin of the sticky notes, it was a guy who, I guess he was a reader in his church, and he always had to mark all the different places in the Bible where he was going to be doing the different readings and such like that. And so he needed to invent an adhesive that honestly had almost no pulling power. And that was the origin of the sticky note. I guess he either worked for or had friends at 3M. And then, on the back of that were trillions of little pieces of paper sold. All right. Jeff Wilkie says, yeah, I'm always folding that piece of tape back on itself. Had a few cover pulls over the years. It's like, yeah, you think you're being cool and you think, oh, no, I'll remember it this time and it'll never flip up. No, it's like the tape has a mind of itself. It will absolutely go nuts. Mike Beam says Amazon has the resealable bags for about $7 for 100. Yeah, you can get them there, but they're cheaper if you buy them from like BCW. Like I say, presumably we're all going to be comic book collectors for a while, so look into the future and buy enough so you can get the bulk deal is where I'd say on that one. Let's see here. Jetsy says Comic Pro Line is having a great sale on bags and boards, free shipping too. Sweet, good to know. Yeah, I think Comic Pro used to be one that we used to get in the area back in California. For some reason, I don't get them out here as much. But okay, so here we go. All right, next tip. Sorry, I'm throat's a little raw here, so I'm just gonna be doing the drinking here. So give me a second. All right, so I've already passed on my next tip which is with comic supplies, go to BCW, buy them in bulk. Let's see. Okay. Buy them in bulk, get the free shipping. The free shipping is where it's at. We used to have a distributor in our area back in California who literally would come down with a semi truck, just on his route. And if you knew enough to get on his route, he would, drop them off to your loading bay. And because we move through a lot of bags and boards here, this is probably not you, but most of the distributors these days have definitely, gotten used to the idea of the internet where they do bulk shipping and so forth. And as long as you're buying like $100 worth of stuff, it's pretty easy to get, all the bags and boards you'll need with not having to pick up the freight tab on that one. They priced it into the product anyway, so don't feel too badly for them. Okay. Next tip, bagging and boarding. All right, so let's talk about our friends, the bags and boards over here. All right, so you need them. All right, bags, boards, you got to have them. And I'm just going to say, of all the things I'm ever going to do with my comic collection, filing and bagging and boarding and manipulating them is the least fun there is to have with a comic book. So my theory is I'm either going to, be really, really efficient with it if I possibly can. If there's some way I can take a couple seconds out of dealing with any of this stuff, I will. If there is no way to improve over the technique I've developed over 30 years of doing this for how to bag and board and things like that, then the only way I can economize on the time, well, it used to be I had kids that, I could be like, here's your first job at human computing, kids. Well, we'll pay you minimum wage, and here's a stack of bags, a stack of boards, and you put those into those, and tell us when you're sick of it, and then we pay you. That used to be basically every kid's first job here at the company. It's if at least if you were my kid. But because all the kids are up and grown and going to college, that's not a thing anymore. Sorry, I'm going to mute my phone here because people are trying to call me. All right. No, I do not want to emergency call. Sorry, guys. Apologize for this. Power off. Boom. Okay, cool. But anyway, because I can't fob this job off onto another kid, and honestly, because bagging boarding is so dull that I can't, give it to any self-respecting employee for any length of time and not have them want to walk out. That leaves us to do the, specifically me to do the bagging and boarding over where I'm at. And if I can't go any faster than I am right now, the only thing I can do is do it when the time doesn't count. In other words, do it when I'm doing something else. And I've actually done enough time and motion studies on what it takes me to take a comic book, take a bag, take a board, get it into the bag and the board, stick a label onto it, and get it into a nicely done stack. That I found out the fastest way for me to make that whole process happen is to have the bag and the board together ahead of time. So that it's just basically one motion to take, I need to stumble over my microphone here. So it's one motion to take the bag, take the comic book, stick this into there, slide it down, rip the seal, slam the seal closed, put it in the stack. I can do that in a couple seconds. It's just a few seconds longer to do it if I have to take the bag, put it in the board, and do the whole thing later. So bagging and boarding ahead of time, at least for me, I mean, feel free to time yourself, but at least for us, it is a win to do it ahead of time. The other thing that's good about bagging and boarding is it's absolutely mindless. In other words, you can do it while you're watching TV, while you're listening to podcasts, when you're doing something else. And so if you're doing something else, well, does the time really count? Not as much. So what I'd say is do your bagging and boarding ahead of time. It definitely makes the things easier to store on your shelves so that, when it comes time to deal with the week's comic books, you just grab a handful of pre-bagged and boarded books, grab the comic books you're dealing with, slam them into each other, seal them up, stick a label on them, and you're good to go. And you've done all the prep work ahead of time. If you have the bags and the boards separate and everything, it gets a little awkward to store them on shelves. They tend to flop all over the place and so forth. But just like I say, in my experience, it's just that little bit slower. So do that ahead of time. Do it while you're watching the ball game, whatever it takes. Do several hundred, and then you don't need to worry about it for months. And then you're just done. All right. Next up, title dividers. All right, let me go pull a list of these. Look at these ones. All right. So what I'm talking about here, I stick my headphone back in so I can hear myself. So I've been a big advocate, if you guys have heard previous shows, of having your comics as organized as you possibly can in their boxes. I am not the guy who takes all the week's comic books, shoves them into the nearest box, and then hopes for the best, for later on. If you're that guy, then mazel tov. As long as you never need to retrieve the comic books again, that's the fastest way to deal with them. If you ever need to deal with with pulling a comic book out of that box again, you're doomed. Because you and I know, even if I knew the box it was in, I would be looking through an average of 100 comics in a long box in order to find one comic. So in my collection, very, very big advocate of keeping things stored in order by title, in order by number within the series and so forth, so that when I go and I want to pull any random comic book in the world, Detective Comics number 983, I'm going to open one box. I'm going to flip through. I'm probably going to touch a maximum of 4 comic books in order to locate number 983, at which point I've pulled it on and done, and the whole process takes about 30 seconds tops. Now we both buy and sell here because comics come in, we want them to eventually go out, and I'd like some money to come in along with the comic going out. But like I say, the only person I'd say that you should, that you should never go ahead and or try to organize your comic books is a person that never wants to retrieve them individually. If you simply want to have them, and you don't really care where they are, you don't care how long you have to look to find them, then hey, go with God. But if you want to find them, you're going to need these. These are title dividers. They're plastic. They're just a little bit longer than the comic books. So here's Lady Van Helsing out of here. And you'll notice that if I file these two together, the tab is going to come just a little bit further up than the title there. I'm going to print the title label from within ComicBase. Just go to the title, print title divider labels for Van Helsing. I actually do that right as I'm entering them into ComicBase. One of the things that you can have ComicBase do is automatically print title dividers for any new comic books in your collection if you're adding them in by barcode. So as I'm beeping in the week's comic books, the first thing that comes off my printer is all the new title dividers I need. I make up the title dividers, and then I print labels for all the new comic books. And I slap them all. They'll all be in the order that I entered them, so that they're going to be exactly in order on the label that that the stack next to me is in. So that part's pretty cool. So as fast as I can grab labels and slap them onto books, that job is done. But anyway, you're going to want to get title dividers. So let's talk about the whole concept of the title divider. So the title divider is there to give you a nice way to say, here's where all the Lady Van Helsings of my collection are. So with these guys, again, big fan of BCW for where to buy these guys at. Buy lots. They're making new comics all the time. One thing that the publishers don't seem to be able to do is keep an ongoing series running for more than about 6 issues before they started up under a different name. and you're going to want to know, for all the different comic books, where to put things at, and you're going to go through a lot of these. When you're buying title dividers, there's a couple different types you can buy. There's short and there's tall. You want tall. There is no question about this. There is no person on the planet I would advise get short title dividers for, with the possible exception of you want all your title dividers to be the same height. If for some reason you've been using short title dividers your entire life, that would be the case where you maybe want to keep using them, because if you have some short and you have some tall, what will happen is whatever is shorter than your other title dividers will suddenly become invisible as you're looking down the box, and you will skip right over titles that don't have a ton of books in them. What we've been doing for the last several years here is, before they kind of standardized these heights way back in the day, we had some short, we had some tall. We eventually figured out that we wanted tall, but then we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of short ones mixed in with the collection. As people buy things, and they clear out a section in my collection, what'll happen is whenever the last comic from that section goes, the title divider goes with it. It gets either if it's a short one, it gets thrown out, and if it's a tall one, it gets thrown into a pile to be recycled. By recycled, what I mean is we want to take the labels off, because we don't want to stack label on top of label on top of label on top of label, because it looks jank. I mean, yes, you can do it, but I mean, have some pride. And so anyway, we go ahead and recycle those guys, and the short ones we've just been losing. And over time, it's actually really helped as far as the speed of us being able to find books, because we're no longer skipping over titles where, I go to Flash second series, and the divider between that and Flash first and between the Flash third series is suddenly an ambiguous place because the title divider itself is too short. So anyway, that does help a lot. It's worth doing, but whatever you're doing, get the same size regardless. One thing also about title dividers is if you look very, very closely at them, and I'm afraid this won't show up on camera, is the latest ones from BCW have a very, very light texturing on them. So compared to years past, they used to be like an absolutely flat piece of plastic. Here, it's almost like the kind of texture you get on concrete. Think of like a smaller version of that. What that does, it does something good for you and it does something bad for you. The bad thing is because when you slap a label on there, there's less points of contact. What that means is that you're occasionally, especially if you haven't done a great job of climate control or if your labels are very old, you'll occasionally find title title divider labels wanting to lift, which is not great. It makes your boxes look like hell, in which case go ahead and reprint the divider labels would be my suggestion, to the extent that it bugs you. But anyway, so that's the bad thing. The good thing about that is when it comes time to recycle your title dividers, you literally can just grab them, poke your fingernail underneath the old label, and usually if you go slow, just peel the old label off. You don't need to soak it or do anything else to get that old label off. Whereas the title dividers that we had that were perfectly smooth, labels would grip onto those things like a death grip, and after 10, 15 years in the boxes, those suckers are not coming off without chemicals, which is the next thing I'll talk about. We'll get to boxes in a minute. Thomas B. Let me add, before we get into chemicals, I want to check the chat here. People are talking about boxes on the chat. I don't. We'll get to boxes in a bit because I have a different take on those ones. And he says, while moving around, you've gotten fuzzy like a low-res. Can still see okay, just not crisp image. All right, let's try. Is that hopefully I'm a little sharper now. Usually the camera's decent about autofocusing, but yeah, when I'm doing the ridiculous thing where I'm moving back and forth, it's the camera autofocus is not super great. All right, so but the mic is so sharp, and so yeah, it'll focus on whatever's in front of it. So we'll take it. Okay, autofocus must have caught up. All right, great. All right, moving on. All right. Okay, next tip with titles. When you're in ComicBase and you have a chance to print title dividers, it has an option to, do you want to print one side or both sides? You want both sides, always. You say, wait, but that's twice as many labels. Yeah, you don't care. Because the way of the world, especially in the world where everything is a miniseries or everything runs for 1 issue, 2 issues, whatever the thing is, I mean, look back in the day when it was Avengers was sitting next to Amazing Spider-Man and there were hundreds of issues in each section. It didn't matter which side the tab was facing. If these things are going to be, if you're looking down on your box and these things are going to be a 1/4 inch apart, because there's only 2 comics between them, in order to be able to read them at all, you want one to be facing this way, you want the other one to be facing that way, so you can see both labels as you go down the list. Otherwise, you have no choice. You want to be able to flip this thing either way based on just when you look at your box, what makes any individual label the most readable. And so yeah, don't try to guess ahead of time. Don't just label one side. Always label both sides. You will be glad you did it later on. It's just, and as you clear out sections, you're always at that point free to flip sections, left, right, whatever makes your boxes the most legible. Because the whole game is you don't want to touch that many comic books in order to get to things. You want to get in, you want to get out, you want to be able to just use your eyes and glance down and see where the comic ought to go. Or, either whether you're pulling it or filing it. I mean, it's all about the speed. All right. So now let's talk chemicals. All right. So if I got a bunch of old, title divider labels here, especially the older ones where they're on the smooth plastic and that label's not letting go for nothing, how do you get them off there? All right, write down the name. Don't forget it. It's important. It's called Goof Off. Goof. OFF. It smells like oranges. Well, it smells like really chemically oranges, but it's a light solvent. It's useful for like cleaning up like paint stains and things like that. It's really, really good for getting rid of adhesive. The reason you want Goof Off, and you want to buy this in as big a drum as they'll sell it to you. So if you can find a quart container of it on Amazon, get some of it. It'll last you forever, but really, really handy stuff. Goo Gone. I'm sorry, did I say Goof Off? Not Goof Off. Goo Gone. Wow. Back it up. If I said Goof Off, so wrong. Because the difference between Goof Off and Goo Gone, Goof Off for some reason is the stuff that you can find everywhere. It's Home Depot. It's everything else like that. If you try to take off labels off of a title divider with Goof Off, it will melt your title. It will melt your title divider. Don't do it. Goo Gone. And again, the stuff that smells like oranges. That's the stuff you want. All you gotta do is take a plastic garbage can. When it's time to do a whole bunch of title dividers, we'll do this every 6 months around here. Is we'll fill up, basically the stuff will wick up anyway. So you only need to put about an inch worth of the Goo Gone in the bottom of a small, like an office trash can, like a rubber one, so it's not going to leak out. Dump your title dividers into the trash can. label facing down, it will wick up the whole thing. So you don't worry about submerging the entire thing. Let it soak there for about an hour, maybe 2 hours. And at that point, then go over to your kitchen sink, set set the water running. And then as you pull the title dividers out of your garbage can, your office trash can, you'll notice all the labels will just want to peel right off into your hand. And so you just kind of throw them into a separate garbage can, and then run the separate the one that you just took out that has the chemical all over it, run under the hot water, let it rinse off a little bit. You're going to go back later on after you're done with the whole thing, fill up the sink with sudsy water, shove them all in there, agitate them around for a little bit, take them out, and then throw them into someplace hot and sunny to dry for a couple hours. So basically spread them out all over your back picnic table or whatever you've got going on, back on your porch. Let them dry in the sun for a couple hours. You might need to come out, flip them over, halfway through, and then just do the next batch. Do as many as your picnic table will handle. One thing about that, the reason I say spread them out on something like a picnic table in the sun is if you take 2 or 3 title dividers, you put them right next to each other, they will happily form an airtight seal, which will never, ever, ever dry. So you'll be coming there a month later. If you have a stack of these ones, and the outside ones will be perfectly dry, but you'll be going up to the ones that were 1 or 2 divider labels into the whole thing, and they will be wet to the touch a month later. So yeah, you got to get them separated from each other. Out on the deck is really the perfect way to go, and doesn't take long, but do go through the trouble. All right. I think that's all I had to say about title dividers. Buying comics. Let's talk about how to save money, right? So, as I said, if you knew nothing else about a given comic book, well, if you look right down by the price there, these darn things are not cheap these days. The average at this point, the average is just shy of $5. So, if you mix in all the specials, all the annuals, all the things that they'll use to charge you more money, now think you got $5 online times every comic book in your collection, and you want to save as much money on this as possible. So most of us, we're going to get our comics one of 2 ways. We're either going to patronize our local comic shop, our LCS, or we're going to get them someplace else. Someplace else being through a subscription service or the like. Now, I want to say there's a really good moral case to be made for supporting your local actual real retailer. Same thing goes where, like, if you've got a good used bookstore or used game store or record store, whatever the hobby is you love, and there's a local guy who's selling it, there's not just a financial case, but a moral case to be made for trying to keep that guy in business. Because it's way too easy for the Amazons of the world, or for that matter, the Atomic Avenues of the world, to wipe out all the local guys. It's hard to compete when you're paying for you're paying for the retail space, you're paying employees, you're doing all the rest of it. There's a lot of overhead there. It's hard to keep up with the selection that some guy with a aircraft hangar out in the middle of Nevada can do in terms of stocking everything on the planet and just mailing it to you. So if you got a guy in your local neighborhood, there's a lot to be said for keeping that guy around if he's a good guy. And here's what I'm going to say: the loyalty comes with a couple strings attached. In terms of my book, if the guy, I'll tell it this way. We used to get our comic books from a shop over in Mountain View, which is no longer there for reasons that are probably self-evident a bit. And we came in and we spend hundreds of bucks per week back when comic books were $1, because we're buying for the database. And this guy would give us 10% off, and he was always a nice guy. He had things out there. He was always nice to us. And then they decided they're going to kill Superman. Okay, so great. And he's like, oh, hey, the Death of Superman thing's coming out in a couple weeks. Make sure you save us a copy of that. And say, oh, yeah, I got it. Absolutely no problem. We walked into the store to pick up our weekly comics that week, and he had all the Death of Superman ones on his backboard for $15. And I'd be like, great, that's making money and everything, but where's our copy? And he said, well, you got to buy it off the backboard. It's $15. I'm like, dude. You can't do that to me. I've been a long-time customer. We had a deal. We'd put our order in ahead of time. You can't just, when it's convenient for you, jack it up prior to, sale at the agreed upon price, the same day of sale. I mean, you can't do that. I mean, so anyway, that was the last time we darkened his door. Yeah, I mean, and at that point we got our comic books elsewhere. Um, if your local comic shop dealer is the kind of guy who would do that to you, then screw them. I mean, at that point, just look out for yourself and buy your comic books the cheapest you can get it. If your local comic shop dealer, on the other hand, is being a good partner to you and he's treated you well over the years and didn't try to jerk you around, then try to cut him a break when you can, would be my advice to him. But I also think is absolutely fair to look for local retailers who have at least a nominal discount for being a subscription level customer. And almost any shop with any kind of longevity that I've ever known will cut them their local their regular customers 10% off if they put in an order ahead of time. So basically, if I'm a comic retailer and I want to buy Crashdown, right, and I'm going to tell you that I'm going to buy it 3 months ahead of time, and so you can order it through Diamond or whatever else, there's an incredibly good chance that you can buy this book, that extra copy that I just said I want, that you can stock that thing for 50% off. That's typically the margin you get as a comic retailer. Now, granted, you're still paying your overhead and things like that, so it isn't like you're making all that 50% as profit. I mean, you got to take the running costs of your operation out of that, but there's a pretty good margin built in. It's a lot better than the local grocery store gets when on a thing of cottage cheese. But if I'm just going to give you the business, say, like, okay, here's my list of the 30 things I'm going to want in June from you. Cutting me 10% off, I do not think is excessive to expect for from the customer side of those things. With that said, and then here's where I'm going to say there's a lot of responsibility for all of us customers as well. If your guy is maintaining a subscription service, don't leave him excuse me. Don't leave him holding the bag by you not showing up and claiming your comic books. Don't decide months later after he's laid out to buy your books that I guess I didn't really like the Flash series. It's not really turning up the way I wanted. So, I mean, I'm not going to pay for those issues that I had you buy. Or worse yet, don't ghost the guy. Don't just not come in again, because then he's holding your stuff for months on end. He can't sell them to anyone else because he doesn't want to lose your business. But if you never come in again, all he's done is he's laid out hundreds of bucks for you and you screwed him. So don't be that guy. So yeah, I do think it relies on good behavior on both sides. But that is the kind of relationship for a comic store that's working well is a wonderful, wonderful thing in your life. It could be a place where you meet friends, it's a place where you talk and enjoy the hobby together, where he'll show you amazing new things that you maybe had never heard of before. It's a great thing to keep going if you've got one in your neighborhood. If you don't have one in your neighborhood, subscription services are definitely worth looking at. There's a number of them out there. But yeah, if your local guy's there and he's treated you well, try to treat him well as well. All right. One thing I have a question for all of you is, if you guys have a local comic shop that works on a subscription basis with you, I know that you certainly can go in there and go in ComicBase and say, print the week's comic books and just show him a list of these are the ones I'd like, or things like that. You can do those sorts of things within ComicBase right now, but are there things we can be doing to make your interaction with your local comic shop guy easier? Let us know. We are all ears on this one right now, because I mean, if there's things you can do, that make it easier for your comic guy, that make it easier for you in dealing with your subscription service, give us some ideas. I want to know the mechanics of how your particular guy's shop works. Some people hand out previews catalogs ahead of time and just say, yeah, check off the order form, give us the completed order form. Other people do other things, but let us know what your guy does. And if there's something we can do to make things easier for either him or you or both, yeah, let us know. Please punch the number here, pbickford@human-computing.com. Send me a note. Really want to know about that. All right. Let's see here. Yes. And by the way, thank you for everyone who's left a comment in the YouTube notes on this one. We are trying to test the algorithm on this one, so please, do if you haven't done so yet, please leave a YouTube comment on this one. Mike says, my guy in Vancouver's great. Have a saver with him and get 20% break on all new comics. Excellent. All are bagged and boarded, and he gives you 20%. That guy's That guy is a prince. Well done. And he started using BCW resealable. Wow, well done. Yeah, it used to be if they wouldn't even give you money, at least it used to be that people would at least give them to you bagged and boarded. But take what you can get. But I think it's fair to ask for something. All right. Let's talk about filing comics. Everyone's favoriteest thing to do with comic books all day long. All right, so all right, I have some comics out here I want to play a little game with. All right. Here's the part where we can be a little arrogant as comic people because we live and breathe this stuff all day long. But I want to play a little game with y'all. These are some comic books that came out into my box. If you guys aren't familiar with how we deal with comics out here at ComicBase, we order like a mid-sized comic shop. We order basically one of everything, and they get indexed out in California where our content team works. We used to all be out there, but me and my family, we moved out to the Nashville area a number of years ago. And eventually, after the content team is done and they push the week's update, then the comics get mailed out to me. They've all been scanned and everything else. And all I got to do is I got to put them into our inventory, which makes me like, hey, every week I get boxes full of new comic books. And all I have to do is file them and put them into my collection. Great. So anyway, good news. I also could read them. But anyway, I know a fair amount about comic books. I've been doing this for 31 years. And let's just take some of this week's titles and let's just play a game called What's the Comic Called? All right. Here's entry number 1. All right. Now, on this case, I actually flipped the labels around. You can see they're down by my finger here with the correct answer. But think about yourself and also think about your loved ones or anyone else who might be helping you file these things. And just to yourself, we're not going to do it in the chat or anything. It'll take too long. But think about how many people would get it right. Because I'm going to guess the answer is, vanishingly small. So we've got a big number 1 down here, and it says Weapon X-Men, and that's the Wolverine guy with Weapon X, and that's the X-Men, so it could be Weapon X versus X-Men, could be Weapon X, whatever else. I mean, what do we think the title is? Turns out the correct answer is that's the easy one, Weapon X-Men number 1. Okay, that's the starter one. Now let's move on, make it a little bit more interesting. All right, this guy. All right. So along the side here, it says Ultimate X-Men. Okay, it's got a giant number 1 on it, right up there. So Ultimate X-Men number 1, right? Sort of, kind of, almost, not at all. It's Ultimate X-Men third series number 1. Okay, so for all is it the first series, the second series, the fourth series, etc. Remember how nobody can keep a series going for more than about 5 issues these days without restarting the whole damn thing over? I mean, what's Punisher on right now? I think it's the 13th series. Pity the poor guy who has to figure out where this thing that says Punisher on it with a number 3 on it, where the heck does that thing go when you're filing it, or for that matter, when you bought it, where you're pulling from it? No, I mean, you really want to have the name be a little more obvious. Here's another one. This comes out there. All right, we got a giant one over there. It says Aliens. All right, so it's called Aliens, right? No, not so fast. I'm wise to your comic wily ways. It says What If Aliens. All right, so clearly it's What If Aliens, right? Nah. Now you open up the front cover of the thing and you'll find out the thing is really called Aliens: What If. So it gets filed under A, not W, along with all the other Marvel What Ifs. Yeah, we would have caught that one. No problem. Okay. We're saving that one for last. All right. So now we got all right, Daredevil. We got the gang war storyline there. So this is just the latest series of Daredevil, right? It's like Daredevil 3rd series or 4th series, whatever else, right? No, this particular one, even though it's Gang War Part 2, they made it into its own miniseries, or Gang War Part 4. Unlike the Poison Ivy 12-parter series, which is going on right now, which is just the latest couple issues of Poison Ivy. So there is absolutely no rhyme or reason to what becomes a miniseries, what doesn't become a miniseries. You got to pity the poor guy, and that could be you, who's trying to file these damn things. And then it gets to its worst possible thing when you sit there and say, all right, what's this one called? Okay, it's called Blitmap. And if you guys know the story on this one, you know how horrible this is. So this is Blitmap number 3, right? Well, sorta, kinda, not at all. Because these are the guys. We talked about this on a previous show, who decided we somehow have a printing process that allows us to make every single copy a variant, right? So there are no two copies of Blitmap number 3 that are the same, because we start with 7 primary covers. So whatever the character is, there's 7 primary ones. And then from there, they have a little, there's a little decoder ring on the back, which kind of gives you all the variation points. But they have different, does it have this kind of styling on the robot body? Does it have a tattoo? Does it have this? Yeah, there's, several variants on that. There's several variants on the color of the print. There's several variants on the color of the paper stock. There's several variants of the color of, it goes on and so forth. So as a result, it winds up being that there wind up being over 1 million versions of everything, and they somehow have an algorithm which prints them so that none of them are the same. So it's Blitmap number 3B, and all ComicBase could do in this case is say, B is the one which has this character in the long body view as opposed to the close body view, and then say specifics vary as far as what the rest of the whole thing looked like. And the reason we had to at least say what the primary character on the cover is, first of all, you'd never be able to have any kind of photo reference, which got you anywhere without that. But the other thing that the lovely folks over at Blitmap decided to do is they decided that we'll also have scarcity versions, where even though everything is unique, and so there's no two copies that are the same, of the major versions, some of the major versions, particularly one of them, is far less likely to come up than all the others. And so there's every reason to believe that those variants, in all their variety, are going to wind up being more valuable than the ones which feature the other views. So yeah, good times. But yeah, and Steve Airing says, I check the indicia. Yeah, you can check the indicia, and that's definitely how we determine the titling on all these things. But all this is really meant to say is, oh, for God's sake, stick labels on things. I mean, I literally could have just scanned 36 books. I could have just seen what they were all called. That this is, Wesley Dobbs the Sandman second series number 3A. I mean, I could have just seen this, but when I go to file them, even if it's an hour later, I have no clue in hell unless I've got something right on the book which tells me. Because again, everything's a small run series. Everything's a variant. Everything's a pain in the butt now. Go whenever you guys add comic books, take the extra moment and stick an ID label on it. You will thank yourself so much in the future, even when you just go to file it the first time, and for definitely when you go to pull it out later and say, okay, so I got a Punisher and I got number 7 on it, but is that the 5th series, the 7th series, the 13th series? It's like, forget about it. Put a label and do the opposite of what I did here. Put the label right here, right top center on the whole thing, so that as your fingers are doing the walking down your boxes, that you can just glance up at that label, which is dead center right at the top, and say, oh, right, this is Blitmap 3B, and you'll know what you're talking about. We've done a number of time tests on this one, because we have to pay people to file, back when we had our office together, and it wasn't just me. Not that I'm sounding bitter about this at all, because filing comic books is the best. But when you're paying people to do the work, you really care about how long the work takes. And even though it takes a little bit more time to print a label out and stick it on there, and which really at this point is, if you're entering your books via barcodes and stuff like that, it's a matter of a couple seconds. But even though it does take a little bit of extra time to do that one, it pays off multiple times over, in terms of how long it takes to file the book, and certainly to pull it out later. It's not even close. So stick labels on things. I know we all know, if we feel like we have the stuff down cold, we don't need to tell us what to do. But I mean, would we have gotten that this is Aliens What If as opposed to What If Aliens? Not a chance. I mean, none of this stuff. And then the variants, forget about it. Anyway, that's all we got to say about that. But labels are your friend. Definitely consider them. Next tip is organize physically if at all possible. We talked about this a little bit before. I've definitely banged on this in the past. So I'll try to be brief on it. But what I mean by that is, when you want to go and find this book in the future, you really want to make it so that your comic collection lays out in the order it's organized, which is to say, the A's are on one side, the Z's on the other side, and everything in between is in some kind of order. So I can predict where to go to look for things without having to look through things. The alternative way to go about this one is something a lot of people do. It's something we even honestly, the software discourages. You might have asked, why don't we have a box number dedicated field in the program? And the answer is because it's a terrible way to organize comic books, and we really wish you would not do it. We know you're going to do it anyway, so we make it so that there are custom fields, and you can add box number if you want. But we want to discourage it because it's a bad idea. The reason it's a bad idea to just say, well, okay, I'm going to write down that Aliens What If was in box 37 of my collection, and then if I want to go find it, I just go say, well, what box is in it? I go find box 37, wherever that is, and then I go leafing through the box, which means, again, long boxes hold about 200 bagged and boarded books, which means on average I'm going to look through 100 items even once I've got the right box in order to get to the right comic book to find it. Like I say, putting things in, box after box, just, going as, put them in as you go. The only thing to recommend it is it's really, really fast just to dump a new comic book in. So if I'm just scanning away my comic books, I'm just sticking them in the next available box. That is the fastest way to get them into the box. But my God, do you pay for it if it ever comes time to come out of that box? Don't do it to yourself. Don't do it to whatever descendant you've got that's going to have to manage your collection after you. Try to organize your stuff in some kind of sequential order, because it takes down literally by like 2-3 orders of magnitude how long it takes to retrieve a particular comic book, and that makes all the difference. So definitely organize physically if at all possible. Next correlation to this one, I'd say, is make sure you never have to move a box to file. So in other words, most of us, have, long box after long box after long box. And there was a big discussion in the chat about whose long boxes people prefer and so forth. I don't prefer long boxes at all, except for temporary storage of, like, when I'm moving things from one location to another, if you're just hauling things around. Because again, long boxes mean you've got to move them to get to the ones on the bottom. And I never just have a stack of one. It's always a stack of like 4 or 5 high. And I don't want to move, 4 or 5 comic boxes in order to get to the one that's at the bottom, because the one you're looking for is always at the bottom, isn't it? It's exhausting. And back before there were better ways, we used to have to file that way in our collection, and it wore out the people who do the filing. We employed a lot of 20-year-old guys at that point, and they were getting brought to their knees. I mean, they would be coming home with back problems. Don't do this to yourself. Don't do this to your people if you can possibly avoid it. Make it so you've got some way of getting to things in your collection without having to move things that are on top of them to get there. There are several ways to get there. My favorite one, if you've got the availability in your house, or if you've got a collection of the size that lends it to this, bookshelves. Bookshelves are terrific. You can walk up to a bookshelf. The stuff looks great on the bookshelves, especially when you have larger volumes on them. Certainly how we file all of our collected editions and such like that. But yeah, no, if you've got a lot of bookshelves and you can just walk up to any shelf at any given moment and pull a book from or a book or a graphic or novel or whatever else at will, absolutely the way to go. The problem that a lot of us get is our collections get bigger than our wall space. And so no matter how many bookshelves we buy, we can never get them all in. There are some tricks you can do to extend it a little bit. You can back to back your bookshelves and arrange them like library aisles, but that only gets you so far. I mean, there is definitely a common case where our collections are much bigger than we can put on shelves. So what some people have done to very good effect, I know our mod Greg Heck does this with his comic books. They use steel case file drawers. So if you get those, do not get cheap ones is always the advice on these ones, but it's investment. You stack them on top of each other, and again, you just pull one drawer out, and you can access everything inside, which again, without having to break your back moving things in and out. It's like filing, because it's like filing, and it is pretty pricey. But again, how many $5 comic books fit in one of those steel case things? Suddenly the idea of spending $200 for a used file cabinet looks pretty damned affordable, especially if it saves your back. And the same thing also goes for spending half a cent to buy a label to stick on it and spending 6 cents for a bag and a board. It's like, when the thing inside is a minimum of $5, yeah, spend the money, protect it. One thing that I do, and I've definitely been a big proponent of these over time, is I use a product called drawer boxes. They're from a company called the Collection Drawer Company, and they're just ingenious. What they are is it's think of a comic long box, except that you put it inside a separate shell, which is basically it's like a tube. It's just a little bit larger than the long box itself, which occupies the space. You rack it up like a filing cabinet, and the long box then slides in and out of the tube. And so you can put these on top of each other. And even if you have one that's 5 boxes down the bottom, you can literally just roll it out like a file drawer, find the one you want, shove it back in, literally just slide it back in, and you're good to go. They cost roughly, call it $20 a box delivered, because it's very heavy cardboard and they're shipping them from Utah. Um, I'm sorry, Utah, I think it's Colorado. But we have literally, I want to say 360 of these. I probably bought 500 over my lifetime, because I've had them since just about the day they were created, and I've worn out some of them. They've served me very well for very many years, but I can't recommend these things highly enough. Guy named Rich Vincent at the Collection Drawer Company. If you haven't done them, check them out. I think he'll sell you a 5 pack for something like $100, or it might be $120 now. But shipped to your location. Check them out and see if it doesn't change your life. Collectiondrawercompany.com is where you want to go for those ones. There are, like I say, there's some other more elegant solutions like bookshelves and steel case, filing drawers if you've got them. And one thing I will say about the collection drawer boxes is they need to be level. I can't overstate how important this is. So if they're on a garage floor and your garage floor slopes, you're in for a certain amount of trouble, because it's a very, very strong product that really relies on maintaining its rigidity in gravity has to work with it, is I guess what it comes down to. As soon as you're trying to skew because your floor is off at an angle, then you need to do dramatic things to keep that from causing you great deals of trouble in the future. But we can get that one later on if you're interested. All right, so anyway, I think I'm just about running out of time here. So last tip I'm going to give you on terms of filing, and I guess we'll pick this up another day because I have more tips. I always worried that I'd have nothing to say in terms of life hacks, and then I started making lists, and then it's like, oh wait, there's much more. I haven't even talked about shipping comic books, which we can get into another time. But the last thing I want to say is, as you guys know, these are paper products, and paper, even though they're printed on much nicer paper than they used to be, breaks down over time. In other words, you can't keep these around for 40, 50 years if you don't take care of not just the physical, artifact, but you also have to take care of the environment that they're in. Paper by its nature wants to go acid. If you guys remember chemistry class with litmus paper and like acid versus base, when paper degrades, it goes acid, and then eventually it discolors. It gets brown, then very brown, and then it falls into a million pieces over time. And that process gets accelerated if you don't have climate control. So you basically want to keep it dry and in a place that's comfortable for yourself. So if you can keep it dry and it's 72 degrees, then it's going to last as long as it's ever going to last, without very, very involved preservation techniques that likes of which they would use for, like, say, the Declaration of Independence. But for at least any of our lifetimes, your comic book will stick around if you can manage to keep them in that kind of general vicinity. Also, if it's very old, you want to make sure that the thing you're storing it in is also not likely to go acid as well, which is why for very valuable, very old comic books especially, it's worth making the investment in Mylar bags, which are inert and buffered cardboard to use as backers if necessary. But for your regular average, it just came off the press $5 comic book over here. One thing you definitely want to do is don't stick them in your garage if your garage is going to get to be 110 degrees in summer. Don't stick them in your attic. I mean, I know you want them out of the way, but they won't last many summers if you keep them there. One way you can have of getting climate control on the cheap, and a lot of people don't think about this, but man, I gotta say, this was a life changer for me. Is when I moved. We used to have things up essentially in an office building in downtown San Jose, but we moved out here to Tennessee, where again the winters are cold and the summers are hot. we had a real problem of just the weight of the collection because we have about 56,000. We used to have about 60,000 comic books in it. The weight of the collection was such that we didn't dare put them on a second floor place in my new house because we hadn't had enough structural analysis of whether whether the several tons of comic books would be able to be staying it there without causing some kind of damage to my new house. So what we decided for, at least say, hey, for short term, we'll put them in the garage, which of course, that's how I found out that even a 2 degree, or 1.5 degree shift in your floor causes trouble that I had with long, drawer boxes that I never had before. But the other problem I had is I had to be able to keep down the infamous southern humidity and control the temperatures. Now, for a long time, I had a dehumidifier running out there 24/7, which had drip lined the outdoors, and you did your best, in terms of the temperature. But it turned out there's a much simpler way, and it took me a couple of years to discover it, but it's the easiest thing of all. One, insulate your garage door to at least a slight degree. Don't have, whatever the plywood garage door it came to your place with, spend a couple $100, get at least up to an R6. It's night and day in terms of how much it will retain an environment if you seal it up well, and if you put even minimal insulation on your garage door. Again, it's a few $100 to get that done, and it will take a ton off your heating and cooling bills. Certainly, you'll be much more comfortable working out there. And if you're storing things like comic books out there, they will be much more comfortable. And then after that, the only thing you got to do, leave the connecting door to your house open. Because as long as there's any kind of air circulation between your garage and your house at all, especially if there's not cold or hot air blowing in from your uninsulated garage door on the other end of things, it'll stay within a couple degrees of where of what your home temperature is. You get all the dehumidifying benefits of your home's air conditioner. You get that for free. You don't even need to run ducting out there. Leave the connecting door to your garage open, close the garage door, have your garage door insulated, and you'll pick up on average, several hundred feet of climate controlled space in your house for basically nothing. So that is my bonus tip for y'all tonight, and we'll take it from there. A couple questions we want to take here before, and then we'll call it a time here. Dip. All right. So, of course, our mod wants to point out to everyone, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And also, don't forget that comment if you haven't done it yet. The ComicBase message boards are located at forums.comicbase.com. Please check them out. Lots of good information on there. And also, there's this dedicated thread we have for new topics for the live stream. So definitely we want to hear your suggestions on that one. Finally, there's also a link there for Andre's world famous ComicBase cover catalog, which is nuts. You got to see it. Absolutely. Brian says placing a tile tracker in every book. Yeah. Yeah, I assume you're just having fun. I don't know how that, every box, maybe, I don't know. Tile tracker is definitely, you get into the question we had a while back with how do you deal with the gem that was embedded in that Eclipso annual that they put out, where you have a pokey piece of plastic that if you put it next to the book next to it is going to dent the book next to it. So I would not suggest to stick a tile tracker in the boxes, but hey, so it goes. Let's see here. Edge browser comment field. Don't know about that. So the Edge browser, there should be a comments field. You might need to be logged in. That might be the thing you're looking for on YouTube if you're not seeing a comments field. But make sure you're logged into YouTube, because I don't think it allows you to comment unless you're logged in. Mike says, I use short boxes. Also use the alpha code to identify the box. Within the individual box, the comics are alphanumerical. Definitely helps. The more ways you can have your comics in order, the less work you'll have to find things. I tend to go to the nth degree. I have the boxes are alphabetical. Within each box, the titles are alphabetical, and within each title, everything is in numerical order. But the more points you can, just whenever you're doing searching, whenever you can limit how big the domain is you're searching across, you're accelerating how fast you can do the search. So the more organized you can be in general, the better. Let's see here. A couple of different takes on this one Steve's pointing out as well. The more sections you can make. So again, you want to divvy up your search space, and And okay, and I think that is about it. Thomas B asks, how often do you need to rebag your comics? 5 years, 10, 7, 20? Um, it's a good question. It depends how crazy you want to be. I mean, uh, I mean, there's a cost of materials. There's a cost of time. I'm at an age now where I value my time pretty decently. So a lot of the reason I'm talking about some of these life hacks things is because if I can't spend the time, I want to spend the time. I mean, if I can't shorten how much time something takes, I want to at least get as much done with as possible. And I'll throw money, at least, on some level, I'll throw money away in order to get time, because time's that the one thing you never get more of. With things like filing comic books, I mean, I laugh about it a lot because it's one of those things where, like, if you want to use your collection in any kind of meaningful way, there's no getting around it. You gotta file them. So if I got to file, I just want to do it as efficiently as possible. Which all it goes to say is, like, when you talk about comic preservation, so if I throw this, aliens what if into a climate controlled room in a polypropylene, bag and board the way it is right now, I could pick this thing up 30 years later and there will not be a noticeable degradation on it. Now, this is for a book that was $5 when I bagged it up. If the book in question was $10,000, hey, I'm gonna really that one I'm gonna sweat how long it takes me to bag and board and store and do things like that, and I'll really baby the hell out of that sucker. But realistically, uh, once upon a time, comic books were polyethylene. Once upon a time, comic paper was much more acid, and upon a time, comic boards weren't buffered. If you're using decent materials these days, neither the bag, the board, nor the comic book are going to be noticeably degraded at room temperature in controlled humidity for decades. Yeah, like decades meaning plural doesn't mean like hundreds, but it means like plural. And I know this because I've stored things for decades and I can pull them out and they look the same way that when I put them into the stack 25, 30 years later. Fun fact, in the earliest editions of ComicBase, we didn't have ID labels, but we did have price labels. And I had stolen a trick from the Apple company store because I used to work at Apple, and because they had a secret code on all their price labels, which was right next to the barcode, which all the humans know that there's never anything valuable next to the barcode. That's all machine stuff, right? But if you knew to look for it in little tiny type, if you just knew to ignore characters like X, and things like that, it would tell you what the Apple employee price was for that thing that you were browsing on the shelf. And so they would teach all the employees, okay, here's how to read the secret code that's on all the price labels. But then all the civilians who come in from the outside who are just stopping by the Apple campus and buying t-shirts and stuff, they of course are going to pay full rack rate, but we could walk in and say, like, oh, okay, it's like 22x75. That means the employee price is 22.75. We did the same kind of thing with a date code on the earliest price labels that were in ComicBase. The price was still what the price was, but I wanted to know when was the label printed so that if the label's very old, I could see, hey, this thing hasn't moved. And, if I was managing a comic store, I might say, hey, this gives me a quick way of knowing what's not moving. Let's reprice it, or maybe it's been moving very well and I need to, these labels are a little too old, I haven't updated the price enough to, it's a hot series, I need to bump them up. So there was a price code in all the earliest comic labels that were in my collection when I first labeled all of it. And some of these things were like from 1995, so they've been out there for coming up on 30 years. I will occasionally sell a book that I filed away 30 years ago. And honestly, they're holding up fine. So in general, if you're putting things into a new bag, a new board today, I would leave it alone. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm speaking about comic books that are the kind that I buy. If I bought comics with 3 more digits in the price, I might feel differently about this. But polypropylene, buffered boards the way you get from like BCW these days, and again with decent climate control, I wouldn't bother rebagging, but that's me. All right, let's see here. What if report recalculate the imaginary value of your entire collection if every book I owned was actually in X condition? It's a pretty simple report to kind of come up on your own because the conditions are stated. The percentage breakdown they are is in You can see it in the grading setup. It's really just it's like a one operate button operation on your calculator to get those different grades. Is look at the percentage of near mint that's listed under setup grading conditions, and you'll be able to see what things would be. Unless you want to get a little bit more involved about it, where if you have books that are all over the place in terms of condition, and if you're saying if they were all in this, what would they be? That would be a little bit more involved. Tell me more about the application of that report, and you might convince us that that's one that we want to build in or not. But yeah, we'll see. Okay, so I think that is it. All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll pick this up another time. Thank you all for coming. I hope this was useful, and if you like it, give us a like. And that's about it. Have a good one. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.